Even if your phone or camera is set in auto, it doesn't always do the best job, nor can it handle all scenarios. That's where Davinci Resolve's Color Page comes in handy. Welcome back to Creator Reality, my friend. Today we're going to take a look at the Color Page and some simple tweaks that you can use to make your footage look better. And look, I shoot in auto all the time, and I just can't be bothered with true color grading. Plus, I've just found that I'm not very good at it. But these tweaks will help quite a bit. So let's go into Davinci Resolve and take a look at what we're working with. Here we have a picture, some riding footage. That's a goofy looking face. And then a handheld shot of me as well. And if you look at all three, you can tell that the shadows are dark in the picture, they're dark in the background here, and they're dark here. So we're going to focus on the shadows really, but we are going to do some contrast and saturation tweaks and kind of give you an overview of how the color page works. Okay, just the high level stuff. So let's start with our picture. We're going to click on the color wheel icon, which brings us into the color tab. And if you have multiple tracks, you're going to want to enable the timeline up here. It'll show you where you have stuff. And I've got some other things I was tinkering around with earlier. You can see over here, there's 3, 2, and 2. You want to make sure that the right one is selected, because if I click on this one and then I come back here, you can see that nothing's selected. But if I select the bottom one, that's the one I want to edit, then I come into the color page, it has selected the top one. So we don't want that. We want to come back over here to our first one though. And notice that the bike is really dark. So we're going to hide the timeline now, so we can see better, but the bike is really dark. So one of the things we can do is come over here into our color wheels, not the HDR. You can use the HDR, but it gets a little bit more complicated, and I like the results from the regular color wheels better. And we're just gonna take our shadow, and you can click here when you've got the arrows and drag up, and you notice it's only modifying the darker parts of the image. If you go too far, it doesn't look too bad, but I don't want quite as much. So I'm going to bring it up to about 55 or so. And that's not looking too bad. And this is a good spot where we can grab the saturation. We can bring it up a little bit. You see the greeners get greener and the blues get bluer. And this isn't a great example. We'll look at this a little bit more later. But if you just can't do anything else, bottom it out to 0 and boom, you have a black and white photo. So now we're going to double click on Sat, and that'll reset it to 50. And our shadows look pretty good. We're going to double click on Shad and bring that back to 0, because we're going to go to the edit page, click on our image, and we're going to hold Alt and drag up to create a duplicate. And we're actually going to do this twice, but we're going to disable with the D key, the top one, and we're going to mess with this middle one in the meantime. Now we're going to come into color, and we're going to drop our saturation down to about 20, and that looks pretty good. But then we're going to come up here and we're going to press D to re-enable our top clip. And then we're going to go back into color. We're going to come over, and I'm going to use the Magic Mask real quick to do some rotoscoping. You might have to do this by hand if you don't have the studio version. And now that that looks good, I'm going to add an alpha output, drag the connectors there. If you want a tutorial on a Magic Mask, it's right up here. Highly worth it. Come back to our edit page. And now you can see that the bike is still saturated. And what we can also do is duplicate this clip, and we can go into the color page and track it again. And now that we're back in the edit page, we can change our composite mode. If you don't see it, it's in the inspector up here. And we're going to drop down and go to screen. And now the bike really pops. So the bike has quite a bit of saturation in it. We can actually drop this down a little bit. So now the bike is fully saturated, but if we come into this clip and click color, now we're back in here. Let's make sure, yep, it selected the wrong one. We want this one. We can bring our saturation all the way up to 100, come back to edit, and now the bike really pops with that bit of color, doesn't it? Isn't that neat? That's a neat effect, right? Boop the like button, maybe consider subscribing. You're learning things, right? Let's get a little bit more complicated. So we're going to move on to this clip, and it starts out, and I'm kind of in the shadows. So for this one, we're going to click on the color wheel again. We can get rid of our timeline because we only have the one thing. And we want to bring the shadows up. So I'm going to click on the 0, type in 40, tab away, and notice how it only affected the darker areas of the image. And now that's much more pleasing. If I click on my node and press Control D, you can see that you lose a lot of detail in the shadows, but now we've regained it. Now, if you were to go all the way to 100, it does look a little funny. So we'll Control Z to undo that. That's a nice simple fix, right? So it does apply to video, but what I wanted to show you was that there's a couple of bright spots here, namely right about here. There we go. If I Control D to disable that, you can see that the highlights weren't really affected, just the shadows. I mean, you do lose a little bit of detail sometimes in the lighter shadows, if that makes sense. And you lose some of the moodiness if you're looking for that sort of character. But most times I'm gesturing at the camera. I want to see me gesturing at the camera and all the detail in me. The background gets blurred by YouTube anyway. Okay, so maybe that wasn't more complicated. It's just a good example of how the highlights and the lowlights play together. Now we are going to get a little bit more complicated in the color tab. And feel free to rewind and replay this section as much as you need to get this, because it took me a long time to understand exactly what's going on and a lot of tinkering. But hopefully I'm able to boil that down for you into some easy tricks that you can use in the color page. So for our third clip, you can see the shadows are a little dark. This concrete wasn't quite as gray. It was a little bit more orangey. So we're going to go into the color page and we're going to tinker with it. And the first thing we're going to do is bring our shadows up to about 25. So I click the number, type 25, and there it is. We bring the shadows up a little bit, and then we want to bring the color down a little bit. You can see this. You see how the blacks get a little bit darker. If I go really far with it, it's too far, right? It looks pure black. We don't quite want that. We just want it a little bit down, just a little bit. But then we're going to bring our contrast down. Okay, we're going to drag it down to about 728 there, 0.728. And we can play around with the color a little bit. We can warm it up just a hair, And then if I go full screen, Control F, and then press Control D, you can see the original. And then here we go, our modified one. We didn't lose too much in the blacks, but we gained a little bit of detail in the water. You can see here that this is kind of a mass of all one color, and now it's got a little bit more texture to it. And up here with these colors in the red and orange and yellow, you can see that the yellow was blown out in the original, but now it's a little bit more muted. And I kind of want a little bit more shadow, bring that up. So now let's play with the saturation a little bit. We'll bring that up to about 65 or so. And then we can really see that the colors are pretty popping there, right? Pretty popping. See, and this orange is not as blown out there now. It's got a lot more orangey to it, which is nice. That's kind of what I'm going for. I'm adding character. And if I disable this, this is kind of sharp, right? In the beard hair here. And then when I re-enable it, now it looks a little bit softer. And I kind of like that. I kind of want those shadows up a little bit more. If I go too far, it looks really Willy Wonka, but I want that up to about 40, I think. There we go. And you'll notice it's not doing as much as it did on previous footage because we have played with our custom curves here. So one more time, before and after, before and after. We've gained a lot more detail in the shadow here without ruining the fact that there are shadows. So that, my friend, is a few quick things you can do in the color tab or color page of Davinci Resolve to kind of just tweak and improve your video quality a little bit, or picture quality, and play around with things. Get a little creative, add a little character, give your footage a little bit more style. So if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to boop the like button, do the subscribe and the share and all that other stuff, and go check out this video next. YouTube thinks you'll like it. It's one of mine, and they're probably right. Anyway, John out.